Alright, I'm sunburned, I'm injured, and this video is late due to a crazy weekend. But today, I'm coming at you with a review of the G&G CM16 Wild Hog 13.5-inch Keymod. That's a mouthful. Stay tuned. Alright, right off the bat, I'm going to mention that this gun was purchased for, obviously, my own personal use and review through our gracious sponsor, River City Airsoft, so be sure to check them out, and thank you again, guys, for hooking this up for me. So, this gun, I bought it with the intention being to run it as, a mid-length carbine and try to compare it in terms of performance to some of the other high-end AEGs that are on the market that have been obviously proliferating. The guns that you can get for $250 to $400, because there's a full metal version of this that is the same thing internally as far as I know that costs $340. I didn't want to pay that much for a gun that was being partially bought for review, so I bought the CM16 version. That's the plastic body. That retails for $265. So for a plastic body gun, that's a pretty hefty price point. So how does it compare? Let's start off with the good things. For being a plastic body, the plastic body feels extremely robust. The billet style of everything, it looks very nice, it feels very nice. It's obviously reinforced. It doesn't have any flex in the magwell or anywhere else that I can detect. I mean, any wobble in the body is non-existent. This gun is rock solid overall, despite having plastic receivers, and honestly, I'm very impressed by that. And I think that that's a big pro for this gun. Is the plastic body is lightweight, it's cheaper, and it's very, very solid. So that's nice. One of the other external, awesome things about this gun, well, awesome and not so awesome, is the 13.5-inch Keymod Rail segment. I say that's awesome because it's CNC'd aluminum and it's very lightweight and it's very sturdy. It's not awesome because G&G decided to be like every other airsoft manufacturer except Krytac and make it Airsoft Spec Keymod. Now, for those of you who don't know what that means that these actual keyholes here are not beveled internally the way that they're supposed to be to fit real steel Keymod accessories. So that means when you want to mount a lot of real steel Keymod accessories, that's a crapshoot. It may or may not fit. For example, the BCM foregrips, as far as I know, will not fit. Some light mounts will not fit. Rail segments will fit, but they actually, because the rail segment mounts have the beveling and the Airsoft Spec mounts don't, so if you try to get them into tight spaces with a gas block, sometimes that can cause problems. And you're also going to have an issue where you're not having the same surface area engaging with the actual rail interface system as you would have with the proper beveling or with the Airsoft Spec Keymod that isn't beveled because it's cheaper. I know it would cost more time on the CNC, but come on, guys. Really, the fact that we're having this special Airsoft Spec Keymod it's really annoying, because otherwise it's a really nice rail system, and I really do like the design overall. It's very slim, it feels very good in the hand, it's lightweight, it looks awesome, and I think that there is a lot of strengths to this rail system. Like I said, that's why it's all the more frustrating that, unfortunately, a lot of real steel components that offer more flexibility than what's available on the airsoft market aren't going to fit. So please, I would love it if the airsoft industry would catch up on this. Now, the pistol grip you're seeing on here is not the pistol grip that came with the gun. This is a Mad Bull Troy Industries pistol grip. And the reason I replaced it is because the stock pistol grip, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I'm sure there's people out there who do like it. I'm sure there's people who disagree with me, but no. Those finger grooves are way too large to be ergonomic. And I'm usually a guy who has trouble with small finger grooves. But those finger grooves are too large, they bring your fingers in too much, and it ends up separating your fingers in a manner that I just don't find ergonomic. I would rather have a slimmer, more textured profile that gives me good control, or just a fat hand-filling profile. But those ridiculously huge finger grooves, not a fan. One of the other big changes and big offerings from the Wild Hog series and all these new ETU-equipped G&G M4s is the new crane stock that G&G has. And there are a lot of things I like about this crane stock, but just like the rail system, there's one big problem that handicaps it for me. I really like the sling attachments. The fact that you have the QD sling point here, the fact that you have the rearward sling attachment where I've got my VTAC through is great. I mean, I personally am never going to use this CR123 storage. I know a lot of stocks offer it. I think it's a little pointless, but I'll probably find a cigar that fits in there at some point, so. But other than that, it's a very comfortable stock. It feels great. The butt pad feels very nice, and I like the fact that the butt pad is hinged on the rear here and rotates as opposed to pulling off and out. That is very nice, that it's nicely retained and it feels very good. And it's pretty solid when it's locked. They clearly have a very good tolerance between the locking tab here and the rest of the stock. So all of that is great. The one problem with it, doesn't fit batteries at all. I know that this is supposed to be a crane stock that fits batteries, but I have yet to find a crane stock battery that it will actually fit. So maybe they tested it with some really tiny lipos, but my 11.1 2000 milliamp lipo would not fit in here. Any batteries that are going to fit in these wings are going to be sufficiently small, you might as well use a buffer tube lipo. And that's really kind of frustrating because, again, it's a great stock design. And I would love if this was able to carry these really big batteries, these really chunky batteries. And I'd love if it was able to carry, you know, even just normal size lipo batteries, normal size crane stock batteries. But it's not. So I end up using a buffer tube lipo with it, which is fine. I use buffer tube lipos in all my other guns anyway, so I'm not going to replace this stock just because for me it's not a big deal. But the battery flexibility on this stock is not good. I almost wonder why they bothered putting the wings there, except to have somewhere to tuck the ETU unit that is in the back here, or the MOSFET unit, into one of those wings while you're running a buffer tube lipo. So that's a bit frustrating. Oh, and of course, there's the lock, but there is a bit of play in the locking position. So while the stock is solid and it's not going to actually collapse in on you, there's a bit of play back and forth with the actual locking position. But overall, it's not a huge deal. It doesn't ruin anything for me, at least not as much as the battery capacity. I was really hoping I'd be able to get a 2000 milliamp lipo in here, just not going to happen. Now let's get into the nitty gritty of this gun, and that is going to be the performance. This is another one where the theme of a lot of stuff I like and a couple of things I don't kind of comes back to haunt it. What I like is the ETU itself. The ETU is a great stock trigger unit in my opinion. I think it's a really great idea. I think including a nice MOSFET integrated electronic trigger is gonna be the way to go eventually, and I think that it's gonna be great when that becomes more standard. I mean, integrated MOSFETs already are catching on more, and those are awesome, but an integrated microswitch trigger, fantastic, I love it. The trigger response on this gun on an 11.1 is great. Rate of fire, I mean, it's pretty good. On the stock motor, it's okay. And that's where we run into the things I don't like, because while the trigger response is great, and while the ETU function, where you can use 3-round burst, and where it, you know, ensures a full cycle and all that, is awesome, the ETU needs to be paired with something better than G&G's stock motor. G&G, your stock 18K motor, apparently can't handle the ETU, or the ETU needs a better fuse, or both. I want to describe to you the experience I had running this gun the first time I brought it to the field. So the very first time I brought this gun out to the field, I was running it for about an hour and a half, and I was using it in semi-auto because some people think I've disabled full auto on my guns. I just don't use full auto. So I was running it in semi-auto all day, and I was using an 11.1 buffer tube lipo, 15C, not a crazy high discharge rate by any means, and the trigger went dead. After an hour and a half of play, trigger went totally dead. I figured, oh, you know, maybe it's the low battery cutoff, maybe that lipo was partially drained or dead or whatever. Swap out to a battery that I know is good because it cycles all my other guns just fine. Nothing. Well, I take a look at the fuse, and the fuse is just totally botched. The fuse is gone. It's totally burnt out. The fuse is burned. So I'm like, all right, well, the fuse broke. And I took it out. It's a 25 amp fuse, which some batteries are capable of 30 amps, so maybe that's not the best choice, but whatever. Then I take out the motor, because after bypassing the fuse, because let's face it, I didn't feel like hunting down another fuse, so I put together a hasty bypass just to see if the gun was still working. So with the hasty bypass, the motor would spin outside the grip, wouldn't turn over the gearbox. So then I look and the gearbox is locked up. And this is where we run into an issue, G&G, because that means one of two things happened. Either the fuse burned out mid-motorcycle and locked up the gearbox, and that meant that, hey, even after I bypassed the fuse or replaced the fuse, I would have to unlock that gearbox either by using a different motor or getting a pick in there to get the anti-reversal latch to release, or the motor didn't cycle the gun fully, and then the fuse burned out when the motor tried to draw more amps in order to be able to cycle the gun because your motor doesn't have enough torque. So one of those two things happened, and the first one is like, okay, so you need a better fuse and a better motor because clearly your motor doesn't have enough torque to not draw a crazy amount of amps in order to turn over the gearbox. Or that means that the ETU failed to complete a cycle because of your motor, so the ETU cut off but didn't complete the cycle, and then the motor couldn't complete another cycle and burned out the fuse trying to draw enough amperage to do so. So that's where we run into a problem with the ETU. Great concept, I love the performance of it, but clearly there's something wrong with the way it's being paired with the motor and the fuse. So you need a better fuse, G&G, or honestly, your best option, you need a better motor. Your motor is not torquey enough, apparently, to not complete a full cycle on an 11-1 battery. If your motor is struggling that much that it burns out a fuse within an hour and a half, that's a sign that there's something wrong with the motor. Now, maybe mine's a lemon, but I'm inclined to think not because by pure chance and without any prompting whatsoever, trust me, this is real, I happened to be talking to someone at the Buffalo Battleground 3-year anniversary, an older gentleman, and he was talking about how much trouble he was having with his G&G ETU because it kept popping fuses. And I said, have you tried swapping the motor? He said, no. I said, well, maybe you ought to try that. So I think G&G's issue is that their motor is inadequate for the ETU. So G&G, I want you to try something with me. I want you to swap the motor, and I want you to put a better torqueier motor in there, and I'm willing to bet this thing will sing. It'll be great. I think you should do that. I think it will be awesome. Fully support it. But the stock motor in here sucks. Whew. Other than that, there's a lot of good. Okay, so it's a stock Combat Machine gearbox other than the ETU. Well, there's nothing wrong with the Combat Machine gearbox. The Combat Machine gearbox, if you leave it alone, that is a solid gearbox. That will work, it will go, it just lasts forever practically if you leave them alone. I know a lot of people poo-poo on Combat Machines, but honestly, I went to my first Lion Claws game with a Combat Machine. I went to my first big op ever with a Combat Machine. And I never felt outgunned. Combat Machines are way better than people give them credit for, and the internals are very solid, and they're very easy to upgrade and easy to repair. So that's awesome, you know, more power to that. The inner barrel is that cheap zinc they use on all their Combat Machines. I'm not sure if it's better on the Full Metal series, but I would hope so because $340 for Combat Machine internals with an ETU and a zinc inner barrel and this crappy motor, that's where we start running into some issues with the price point. Because when you get into it, the competition at the $340 and even $270 price point is pretty stiff. The new Krytac Alpha series is out. You can build a G&P AK for about G&P M4 for about $250. You can get some pretty awesome stuff for $250 to $400. And while this is good when it's running, I wouldn't say it's great. I would say that because the Combat Machine internals are good, but they're not as reinforced as G&P. They're not as immediately responsive as Krytac. Their motor is certainly not as good. Their hop-up is great. G&G always does a great hop-up. The G&G green bucking, fantastic, love it. The hop-up unit, also, never had a problem with the G&G hop-up unit. Even the zinc inner barrel, while it's cheap and lightweight and definitely flimsy, it gets you decent enough accuracy and you can upgrade it pretty cheap. But is this the Krytac killer? Because that is what a lot of people have been asking of these new G&G ETUs. No, it's not the Krytac killer. Honestly, I wish I could say it was because that would mean that the market is pushing forward leaps and bounds, but it's not. There's too much wrong with it. Is it a good gun? Would I recommend it? If you can get one of the models that costs like $200 to maybe $240, absolutely, this is a step up from your standard combat machine. The ETU is a great idea, but it needs a new motor, and it might need a new stock if you want a bigger battery. You might want to bypass the fuse, and it might need a new inner barrel. Other than that though, I think it's a pretty solid gun, but it's got those big handicap issues that really keep me from saying that it's great. And G&G, if you're watching this, don't get mad at me. I'm just the bearer of bad news because your gun doesn't live up to hard use. Sorry. All of these issues became apparent to me in one day of playing. And that's why I usually like to do reviews longer term after I've used it several times, because I like to allow flaws to expose themselves to me. I mean, my long-term Krytac video, I think I was pretty damn critical because there was a lot to criticize. I still really, really like the gun, but I was critical. This exposed as many, if not more, flaws than the Krytac showed me in 18 months in an hour and a half. Yes, so that's where we run into some problems. G&G, if you want to make this gun great, and if you want to get a higher rating from me, and you want to be the Krytac killer, put in a better motor, put in a better inner barrel. Just those two things alone would help a lot. Oh, and cut your Keymod to real steel spec. Seriously, this is ridiculous. I have a whole other rant video I'm going to make on that. So cut your Keymod to real steel spec, put in a better inner barrel, put in a better motor, and you'll be pretty darn close to, some Krytac level performance. Issue is, as of right now, I simply can't vouch for the reliability of the ETU when it's combined with the stock motor. And at a price point of $270 for this gun and $340 for the full metal, that's a big problem. Someone could buy a G&P and drop a BTC Spectre FET, if they can find one, and have a $350 gun. And that would essentially outperform this by leaps and bounds. So, like I said, please take a good look at your motor. That's gonna save you. So all right, I was very critical, and overall I do think this is a good gun. It's everything you know and love about the combat machine, but it has problems, and this new batch needs a new motor. Just saying, it's time to step up your game, G&G. If you want to step up that price point, if you want to step up that performance, you gotta do it all around. So all right, this is eHouse with Gun Gamers, and I'm signing off.